Welcome to the third episode of Voices of IIS, a space to learn about the wonderful people who work at IIS, explore fresh perspectives, and hopefully get inspired. Today's guest is a specialist in Fatimid studies. Having obtained her PhD in Islamic studies from the University of Edinburgh, Dr. Shainool Jiwa is currently enjoying a well-deserved sabbatical, working on several exciting projects which we will hear about later, as well as being an amazing grandmother to her first granddaughter. Welcome, Shainool, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, yay. Well, we look forward to spending the next 20 minutes or so with you. Before we hear about your research, what we would love to hear about is the journey that led you to IIS.
So it's a long time ago, and it all began in the early 80s, actually, when I had heard about the Institute but wasn't involved with it yet. And I had just finished my degree in Islamic history and political science and philosophy. And so I was then thinking about what do I do next? So His Highness was visiting London in 1979, and I had just arrived in London a few months before that. And so I got very involved with that whole visit and volunteering in all sorts of ways. And that's where I heard about the Institute of Ismaili Studies during that visit of His Highness. And I was very interested because history is something that has always appealed to me. I did European history for my A-levels, for example, and absolutely loved it. So history was always something that I'd enjoyed. And I thought, my goodness, if there's an opportunity to study that at the Institute, that would be fascinating. So I got in touch with the people here and found out about the programs. At that time, the Institute wasn't offering its own programs yet, but they were already providing scholarships for people who were interested, and if they got admission at what they considered a good university, then they could help you towards the fees and support. So this was already September 1980.
This is still really early days because the Institute was founded in 1977.
Exactly. Very early days. So I applied at the University of Edinburgh and a couple of other American universities, and I get admission at Edinburgh University. But the term was starting 1st October, and I was doing all this sort of in September. So it was all very last minute. So I got the admission. I then connected with the Institute, and they were very kind. They gave me a partial scholarship because obviously funds had already been dispersed for that year. But anyway, they gave me a partial scholarship, and off I went to Edinburgh for the first time. Didn't know anybody there, just turned up, and the rest is history, as they say. Mm-hmm. That's how I got involved with the Institute. I then spent some time at Edinburgh. I learned Arabic. I went away to Jordan for 6 months, stayed there to improve my Arabic. Mm-hmm. And then the Institute started its master's program with McGill University. And so they invited me to join that. So then I joined that program, and the way that worked was that we spent 1 year at the Institute, and we had some faculty from McGill teaching us, but also some IIS faculty. And then in the second year, we went off to Montreal and did our courses there and wrote up a dissertation that we needed to submit there. And that's what would then give us a master's from McGill University that was in association with the Institute. It was the first program that of that kind that they had set up. And so that's what I was part of. And I ended up therefore with a master's from McGill University. And then when I finished that, there was an opportunity to continue studying for a PhD that the Institute was happy to support.
Wow. So from undergraduate through to graduate, there's always been that link with IIS.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And prior, when you arrived into England in 1979, where were you coming from?
So at that time, I was coming from Karachi. I had done my first degree at St. Joseph's College in Karachi. And I was then coming to London to explore options because my family were sort of spread between London and Karachi at the time. So I was coming here to check out options and see what I might do. And I ended up in this particular, at the Institute.
And Scotland is so different to Pakistan. That must have been a real shock.
It was. And also it's quite unusual that, I found myself in Edinburgh, where I started learning Arabic for the first time. I mean, of all the places. But University of Edinburgh has been teaching Arabic for over 500 years. Would you believe?
Wow.
So however odd that sounds, it's actually been a hub for Islamic and Middle Eastern studies for a very long time.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit more about what sparked your interest in Islamic studies. So you had this passion for history that you've mentioned, but what was it about Islamic studies?
Yes, so because up until my A-levels, I had studied much more about European history, and all my subjects had been in English, and so of course the geography was all about the Western world, as it were. And because of course I was born in East Africa, so I was born in Tanzania, so then I'd had exposure to some of that in my early years, and then I'd lived in London for a period of time, and then I'd gone to Karachi with my family. So already I had that kind of well, one could say checkered, but also maybe a bit more diverse exposure. And so Islamic studies then opened up vistas in terms of understanding the Muslim world, understanding the civilizational aspects of Islam, not just the history. And that I found fascinating. It was opening up a whole new world that I had glimmers of in my experience, but I hadn't had a chance to really immerse myself in.
And what about Fatimid studies? Because that's quite niche as well. So you start broad, you're looking at history, and then you're looking at, Islamic history and Islamic civilizations and culture. Then now it's sort of like, okay, let's look at the Fatimids.
Yes. So it really is about how history was taught when I came to the Institute. We had Professor Abbas Hamdani, who was teaching us the whole history course. But the way he taught Muslim history was very integrated. So you learned about the broader mosaic of developments in the Muslim world, but you also, at the same time, learned about who the Shia were and what they were doing and how they sort of start off, etc. And then as things develop, the whole, origins and development of the Ismaili, branch of Shia Islam as well. And so I learned all these in tandem, if you like, right? It was kind of all part of this mosaic that was unfolding. And he was an excellent teacher. He was a very good teacher, very good, and he inspired a lot of interest in me. And when it came to the first assignment that we had to do, I really wasn't sure what am I to do. And he said to me, you already have some Arabic. You've done because I'd already done 2 years of Arabic at Edinburgh. So he says, you've got 2 years of Arabic. Rather than doing a paper on, one subject or one figure or whatever, why don't you look at Al-Makrisi's Itiyaz al-Hunafa, which had just got edited, but it wasn't translated yet. And he said, and look at, you've got enough Arabic to be able to look through and make a list of all the sources that Makrisi mentions that he has taken stuff from on the Fatimids. Because, of course, Makrisi is a Mamluk scholar. He writes in the 15th century, but he had access to first-hand Fatimid sources, which meant that he was able to write about them in a far more palpable and far more organic way, or a far more sort of eyewitness accounts that he preserves as part of his narrative of events that had happened under the Fatimids. And so off I went with these 3 volumes of Makrizi's Itiyat in my Christmas holidays, and there I was, flicking through, and he said, well, you don't need to write up a paper. You can just prepare index cards and write up the information, and that would be a really good piece of work that you could think about developing later. So I did that and found it fascinating because it made me open an Arabic source on the Fatimids that had some amazing, it was a treasure trove of learning. And so I got hooked. And so then when it came to doing a paper for Professor Madelang's course on early Ismaili history, or early Ismaili texts rather, I chose to write on Abu Abdullah Shi, Da'i Abu Abdullah Shi, because he was the pioneering Da'i who established Fatimid Dawa in North Africa, which then led to the establishment of the Fatimid state in Tunisia, in present-day Tunisia, which was called Ifriqiya at the time. And so that then was another key piece that got me then into primary source readings now around the Fatimids. And I've just never stopped being curious about them. And we are very fortunate in that for that particular period of history, we have so much material available. It's like when Einstein was saying at the end of his life that, he feels that he's just played with the pebbles at the shore. At the shore where there's a whole ocean. Well, that's how Fatimid's knowledge about the Fatimids feels to me. That I've been playing at the pebbles all these years, and there is yet a whole ocean.
Wow. And we have Professor Hamdani to thank
Absolutely
for the inspiration to get into this field.
Very much so.
I want to sort of get into being on the ground. So you have led courses for IIS, which is walking in the footsteps of the Fatimids in North Africa. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about your experience running that course and literally being, in the country, in the city, in the roads, smelling the smells and seeing the sights. And maybe you could share that with us.
Yes, I think that's something that to me is a flagship of the Institute. The fact that we have developed short courses in places of historical and contemporary interest to us. And, we all know about Cairo, and we all talk about Cairo, of course, with a lot of pride and conviction, rightly so. But the first city that the Fatimids built themselves is Al-Mahdiya. And that was built by Imam Mehdi. And it is in Tunisia, and it is a functioning city to this day. And so having the opportunity to take participants on our short courses to actually walk in the footsteps of the Fatimids, because the old city of Mahdiya is still intact. So you still have this massive gate that was built from the Fatimid times. And you walk in and you walk along those streets, and they are even today named after our imams. So it'll say Sharia Al-Qaim li Din Allah, or Sharia Jawhar Sikili, Sharia meaning street. So even today you are walking literally along streets that are named after our imams, after our key figures. And I remember, a long time ago when my family was very young, and one of the sun and sand holidays we took was to Mahdiya, because it's a beautiful sun and sand resort as well, of course. So for those of us who like that, then there is that too. And I remember us meandering one evening to say, where might we have something to eat? And we wanted something local and, not the usual standard sort of tourist fare. And we ended up at this restaurant which had this beautiful vineyard in front of it, and these grapes were in season. So you had these bunches of wonderful purple-looking grapes, sort of hanging at the doorway as an arch. And the restaurant's name was Matam Al-Muiz Lidinala, the restaurant of Al-Muiz Lidinala. And so, of course, we went in and we enjoyed the food. But I just couldn't get over the fact that there is that level of our historical presence in a part of the world that we still have access to and can visit. And, the whole harbor where the Fatimid ships supposed to be, supposedly sailed off to Cairo, not to Cairo, to Egypt. Of course, they laid the foundations of Cairo. The whole, the palaces, where the palaces were, a lot of it is destroyed now, but the site of where the palaces are still there. And if you're lucky, you actually catch pieces of mosaic that must have been part of the palace flooring that you can still see. The mosque that they built has been rebuilt, but in the same site, in the same place that had been built by the Fatimids. So we in Al-Mahdiya, which is where we then hold this course and tell the story of the Fatimids and the origins and their, efflorescence, can really be told as you walk along.
That is
footsteps.
That is really profound. And thank you for painting that picture, because I literally feel like I'm there looking at the beautiful purple grapes. So thank you so much. But let's think about history.
Yes.
And what role, if any, history plays in today's society.
Yeah. That's a very good question. And I think often when people think of history, they think of it as names and events and figures in the past, So yes, it was, there were some glorious developments and glorious figures, and but it's all in the past. But in fact, history is much more than a repository of facts. It is actually I often say when I'm talking about history, particularly for a faith tradition, it embodies our values. It embodies who we are. It's our DNA. So the ethics that we have lived by, the kind of historical examples that we still remember today. So when His Highness talks about that period, for example, he often talks about attitudes that are pertinent from that period. So he talks about the role of intellect being paramount. He talks about relations between Muslims and non-Muslims being warm and cordial. He talks about Muslims from different denominations living together. And all of these are what he has mentioned, attitudes that are really important attitudes as precursors of attitudes for the 21st century. So here we are looking back a whole millennium or a whole 1,000 years ago, and are able to actually see how do these values and attitudes play out. What role, for example, the Fatimids played in creating a whole infrastructure of knowledge, dissemination and transmission, such that it has always remained as part of the Alid tradition, as we are reminded even today. How did they create their whole administrative apparatus, where not only Ismailis and not only Shia, but Muslims of different denominations, Christians of different denominations, Jews of different denominations could contribute to the administration of the state, and they could take on the highest roles. They could become chief minister if they had the right qualifications and competencies. And so you can see that in creating this infrastructure of knowledge transmission, of serving society and the state in that way, that you are creating paradigms of where these values and ethics can be lived and practiced. And so there is so much to learn that is of such critical importance to us today. And it is from our own past. It doesn't have to be something that it's just us knowing more about our past.
Exactly.
As opposed to always thinking, oh, these are developments that happen elsewhere and in other societies, and they are only part of our modern ways of thinking. So yes, it is anachronistic to talk about pluralism at that time, because pluralism per se as a concept is a much more, of course, modern concept. But the ethic underlying inclusion is certainly something that you can find. And this is just a little dip. I mean, there are lots of other examples one could come up with.
I mean, I thank you for introducing us to that and to that dip. I mean, I think really it's what you mentioned up front, right? It's like, how are we viewing history? And I think that's probably one of the most important things, that it isn't exactly what you said. It's not about learning about the battles that took place. And while that stuff is important, but it is our perception and how we are viewing it and what we can take from it and bring with us along on this journey that we're a part of today.
Absolutely. And also learning what we mustn't do. Having tried out things that didn't quite work out as well. And again, I think certainly in the Fatimid period, you get some excellent examples of how they start off. They try out certain things in terms of administration, in terms of statecraft. Then they evolve and they change and they become more and more and more inclusive. So by the time they come to Egypt, that's where you find that level of inclusivity and that level of confidence in their own statehood, right? So it's not something it's not a magical switch.
Yep.
It takes time, it takes experience, it takes exposure, but that's what makes it so fascinating.
Yeah, and it would be a real tragedy, actually, for us not to be looking back and capturing those lessons and understanding our heritage and our history and the role it plays for us today. Just switching gears a little bit. Recently, we had Dr. Shiraz Kabani on the show, and he spoke to us a little bit about the Living Ismaili Traditions series. And you're currently the general editor for the World of Islam series. Could you maybe speak to us a little bit about the series?
Sure. So it's, again, very interesting. The Institute is now renowned for its scholarship in Ismaili history, Ismaili studies rather, in, Shia studies, in Quranic studies. And as part of my understanding of His Highness's guidance to the Institute over several years was this instruction to say that now that we've established these areas of expertise within specialist readership in scholarship, how do we mine that information? How do we synthesize the learnings from that and other sources that we have around and make these available and relevant and interesting and engaging for non-specialist readership? So we developed a strategy paper and we presented, and His Highness gave us guidance. And then one of the things he mentioned to us is that, do you think the one series can do everything you want to do in terms of making knowledge more accessible to non-specialist readership? Because we have, of course, the Ismaili community globally, and it has its normative issues and concerns and, learnings that it wants to do. And then there is the whole world of Islam, as it were, right? And how do we then also speak to the lacuna there? Because, Islam, as we all know, is not only a theology, just as it's not only a civilization, just as it's not only one thing or the other. It is really, it touches all facets of life because Muslims live in life, right? So then, as part of a reflection with our Board of Governors here, it was decided that we really need to set up two series. The World of Islam, which really is set up to dispel some of these misunderstandings about Islam, but also some of the gaps around thinking about Islam, both historically as well as in contemporary times, and about Muslims, but also have a a dedicated series called Living Ismaili Traditions, where we do a deep dive into the Ismaili heritage and, learnings and, culture and heritage and all of that. So we've ended up developing 2 series. In the Living Ismaili Tradition series, we've had 2 publications, as we know. Shiraz Kabani's book was the first one, and then we've had Alia Remtila's book on Jamaat Khanas and the story of the East African Jamaats. We are about to release one on Ismailis in Iran before the end of the year, inshallah. And that series continues in that way because there is a lot of interest in the community wanting to learn about various traditions from within the community, whether it's Iranian, whether it is the broader Badakhshan tradition, whether it is the Syrian tradition, etc., or the South Asian. So that's the trajectory that series is moving on. And in the World of Islam series, we've published 4 titles, and the 5th one we are very hopeful will come out this year as well. And it is on storytelling, it is on adab, it is on this whole idea of the ethics of living that we hope to bring out this year as well. And so, again, one of the major aims of this series is to provide knowledge that is authentic, that is solid, that is, well-researched, but in ways that are much more of interest, purpose, and palatable to non-specialist readership. So these books are only published in paperback. We never print in hardback. They are available in audio formats. They're available in digital formats. They are getting translated in several languages: Arabic, Persian, Gujarati, Russian, Portuguese. I forget one more, but there are several that we are working on. And so the idea is to make this knowledge really accessible and engaging for the community in the context in which they live and among the other communities in which they live. So it's really about finding those connections with the world around us and seeing those and presenting and learning more about those, as well as, of course, the distinctiveness of what makes us who we are. So those are some of the works that are already published. There are several other titles in the pipeline that hopefully through our website and other ways we will be making available to hopefully more and more people who will find this of interest and who will, maybe that will be their stepping stone to then reading other materials, resources that we have developed here at the Institute. And maybe some will get hooked enough to come join our short courses, join our other graduate programs, or however else they may choose to access us.
And I'm sure that we probably have other members who are actually part of the listening community who would probably say that, well, Dr. Shainool Jiwa inspired me to learn about the Fatimids or Ismaili history.
Very kind.
So one last question for me. What is on the horizon for Dr. Shainool Jiwa?
So, having written 2 works, Fatimids 1 and Fatimids 2, in the World of Islam series, which I really learned from, I really enjoyed, because there are lots of things once you get into a particular area that you just take for granted. And so when I write, things that I already know, I assume others do too. And so when then I have an editor saying, what do you mean by this? Or why do you say this? Or can you explain that? Or it's been very good because it's made me take 3 steps back and say, okay, here's, What I'm now doing though is going back into that whole source immersion. So for my doctorate, I had worked on the Fatimids in Egypt, their arrival, their settlement. And I'd never gone back to that and always meant to. So this sabbatical year has been a real gift of time, because it's allowed me the headspace to go back into all those primary sources and look at the life and times of the Imam Caliph, the fifth Fatimid Imam Caliph Al-Aziz Billah. He is interesting because he is the first Fatimid Imam Caliph who begins his reign in Egypt. So, of course, we have under the reign of his father, Al-Mu'izz li-Din Allah, the arrival of the Fatimids in Egypt and their settlement and the building of Cairo. But the foundations of Fatimid rule in Egypt are laid in Al-Aziz's time, and he reigns for about a quarter of a century. And he lays down foundations in terms of administration, in terms of judiciary, in terms of even the da'wah and how that is going to operate the Ismaili mission, etc. And so it is a very critical period of Ismaili history, as it were. But it is also very fascinating because when the Fatimids do that, there are three other major empires. There is the Abbasid Empire with its capital in Baghdad. There is the Byzantine Empire with its capital in Constantinople, which is Istanbul today. And there is the Umayyads in Spain, Umayyads of Andalusia, which is present-day Portugal and Spain. And with their capital in Cordoba. And it's all of these are interacting around the Mediterranean. So the 10th, 12th century Mediterranean world is a very vibrant world. And the Fatimids are inextricably linked to this world and contribute to it. And so in telling the story of Al-Aziz, I'm hoping to position the Fatimids as part of that broader milieu. And one final fun fact about the Fatimids before we stop, if I may. They are the only Shia dynasty who have ever ruled over Egypt. Prior to the arrival of the Fatimids in Egypt, which was in 969, although Egypt had become part of the Muslim world 3 centuries before that, and since then to today, we have never had Shia rule in Egypt. It has always been Sunni. Once it became crystallized as Sunni school of Islam, as it were, and so or Sunni branch of Islam rather. And so it's fascinating that here are these Ismaili Imam Caliphs who established themselves in this part of the world, rule for not just. So if you think about the Umayyads, the first Umayyads who rule, from 661 till 750 when the Abbasids take over, it's a 90-year rule. The Fatimids rule for 200 years. It's longer than the British Raj in India, for a more modern kind of comparison. And they do so as Shia Ismaili Imam Caliphs. So whatever foundations they lay of the empire were such that it allowed them to function as Ismaili Imams and yet be inclusive such because the majority of the Egyptian population remained Sunni. There was no forced conversions that we know of in Egypt at all. So it's a very interesting period of even our own history.
I think I could probably listen to you speak about this all day, but we have come to an end. But I just need to note that I love fun facts about the Fatimids. We might need to take that offline because that was quite amusing. But look, I want to offer a huge, massive thank you to our special guest, Dr. Shainool Jiwa, and to say it really has been a delight and it's been inspirational. Thank you so very much. And if any members would like to learn more about the Fatimids, you should definitely pick up volumes 1 and 2 as part of the World of Islam series. And as Dr. Jiwa had mentioned, you can get this in print. They're available digitally, and as well, they're available on audiobooks. So to our audience, a big thank you for spending your time with us and for being part of our community of listeners. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts. That's it for today. I'm Selina, and this is Voices of IIS. Until next time, take care.